Good morning. Canada has long been a world leader in standing up for human rights and for dignity. La Déclaration des droits de l'homme des Nations unies a été écrite par un Canadien. La responsabilité de protéger est aussi une doctrine développée par un Canadien. Nous avons participé à des dizaines de missions de maintien de la paix. We were a leader within the Commonwealth on pushing for an end to apartheid. But today, we've become a nation of silence, not one of principled action. Genocide is taking place in China right now. Aujourd'hui, le Canada est une nation de silence et non d'action. Je veux être clair. Il y a présentement un génocide en Chine. C'est un fait. Uyghurs in China are persecuted because they are Muslim and an ethnic minority. Approximately 1 million Uyghurs have been forcibly relocated into detention centers for re-education in Jiangxing. People who have managed to escape have reported horrific, coordinated violence using physical, mental, and sexual torture. Women have spoken of mass rape and sexual abuse. Women have been subjected to forced sterilization. China is an incredibly secretive state, so we can only imagine what else the Uyghur population has been subjected to behind the curtain of communism and attempts to limit reporting on Chinese state actions. But the evidence that has managed to leak out is more than enough. China is committing genocide against Uyghur Muslims. It has established a police state in Hong Kong. It has kidnapped 2 Canadians and held them hostage without cause or due process for 2 years. Il est temps pour le Canada de demander au Comité international olympique de relocaliser les Jeux de 2022 hors de Chine. Le Canada a le devoir d'agir, mais nous n'avons pas besoin d'agir seul. Il faut travailler avec nos alliés pour transférer les Jeux à l'extérieur d'un pays qui commit un génocide. The time has come for Canada to call on the International Olympic Committee to relocate the 2022 Winter Olympics out of China. Canada must take a stand and show leadership, but we do not need to do this alone. We should work with our closest allies and coordinate an effort to relocate the Games for 2022. And in doing so, remind our allies of the important role Canada has played and must continue to play in taking an early stand for human rights and dignity. The first principle of the Olympic Charter states that the Olympic movement is intended to, quote, create a way of life based on the joy found in effort, the educational value of good example, social responsibility, and respect for universal fundamental ethical principles, end quote. I think Canadians would agree that it would violate universal fundamental ethical principles to participate in an Olympic Games hosted by a country that is committing a genocide against part of its own population. The Olympic Games and the athletes who compete in them inspire each generation, and they must continue to provide such inspiration, but not in China, in the shadow of a genocide. Aujourd'hui, je demande au Premier ministre Trudeau d'agir. Le temps des paroles est terminé. Il faut relocaliser les Jeux olympiques de 2022. Le Canada ne doit pas envoyer d'athlètes en Chine. Il ne doit pas encourager ce génocide. Today, I call on Prime Minister Trudeau to actively seek the relocation of the 2022 Olympic Games. Canada should not be sending athletes to China in the middle of a genocide. Thank you very much. I'm ready for your questions.
Et nous allons maintenant passer aux questions, commençons par les questions au téléphone. Un petit rappel, comme à l'habitude, une question de suivi. We'll now take questions, starting with questions on the phone. Quick reminder, as usual, 1 question, 1 follow-up. Operator, do we have a first question?
Thank you. Merci. Please press star 1 at this time if you have a question. S'il vous plaît, appuyez sur étoile 1 maintenant pour toute question. La première question, the first question is from Catherine Lévesque, La Presse canadienne. Please go ahead, your line is open. Votre ligne est ouverte.
Oui, bonjour, Monsieur O'Toole. J'aimerais vous parler de la lettre que vous envoyez Chrystia Freeland. Là, elle vous demande d'arrêter de retarder l'adoption de C14 là, qui prévoit l'adoption de nombreuses mesures dans l'énoncé économique. Je me demandais qu'est-ce que vous allez lui répondre à ce sujet-là. Merci.
Le gouvernement est en charge de nos débats ici dans la Chambre des communes. Et si c'est une priorité pour ministre Freeland, on va débattre aujourd'hui. Mais en fait, M. Trudeau va introduire un autre projet de loi sur un enjeu pour le Parti libéral avant la prochaine élection. Nous sommes ici pour débattre les projets de loi et de travailler avec le gouvernement pour le bien-être des Canadiens, particulièrement pendant la pandémie.
Parfait. Justement, sur ce projet de loi qui va être annoncé aujourd'hui, j'aimerais vous entendre parce que le programme de rachat ne sera pas obligatoire. Je me demandais donc si, sur le fond, c'était un projet de loi qui vous convenait là, au Parti conservateur.
On va examiner le projet de loi du gouvernement, mais malheureusement, aujourd'hui, avec un projet de loi sur les armes à feu, le gouvernement a voté contre un projet de loi d'arrêter la contrebande, les armes à feu illégales. Et c'était un exemple d'un geste par le gouvernement contre la sécurité publique.
Opérateur, prochaine question.
Thank you. Merci. La prochaine question, the next question is from Madeleine Blais-Morin, Radio-Canada. Please go ahead, your line is open. Votre ligne est ouverte.
Monsieur O'Toole, toujours sur le projet de loi qui sera déposé sur les armes à feu, à quel point le coût du programme vous préoccupe? À quel point c'est un enjeu pour vous, le fait de dépenser des fonds publics pour acheter des armes qui seront interdites?
On doit cibler sur les menaces et c'est les armes à feu illégales et on doit avoir les politiques pour ça. Il y a un mois, on a eu un débat sur ça dans la Chambre des communes et M. Trudeau a voté contre une loi d'arrêter les armes à feu illégales. On doit cibler sur la sécurité publique et on doit travailler avec les policiers et les grandes villes contre les gangs de rue. Et ça serait mon approche de cibler sur le problème.
Je comprends que ce serait votre approche de cibler notamment sur la contrebande. N'empêche, il y aura un projet de loi qui sera déposé aujourd'hui et ça va proposer un programme de rachat. Est-ce que la question des coûts vous préoccupe?
Oui, parce qu'on a vu une approche comme ça avec un autre gouvernement libéral, avec un programme avec une coût de seulement 2 millions de dollars. Et après quelques ans, on a dépensé près de 2 milliards de dollars. Particulièrement en pleine pandémie, on doit cibler sur les vaccins et la relance économique. Ça serait ma priorité comme chef de l'opposition et comme Premier ministre. Et la sécurité publique est une priorité aussi. Et on doit cibler sur la contrebande.
Operator, next question.
Thank you. Merci. La prochaine question, the next question is from Stephen Chase, Globe and Mail. Please go ahead, your line is open. Votre ligne est ouverte.
Yes, good morning, Mr. O'Toole. I wanted to ask you about our story about Huawei Canada, the government partnering with universities to fund research that's being conducted in collaboration with Huawei Canada. I'm wondering if you think that this is still an appropriate thing for universities to do. The Foreign Affairs Minister yesterday said that this is arm's length decision making by NSERC, so it's really out of their hands. What's your take on this?
It's completely unacceptable. And conservatives have been calling for the government to be serious on Huawei for several years now. Parliament voted to not have Huawei as part of the 5G infrastructure. And I think we have to recognize that state-owned or state-controlled Chinese enterprises should not be partnering with institutions developing intellectual property because we can't guarantee that it's maintained in Canada, and we could erode our jobs and our competitiveness. So Mr. Trudeau finally has to get serious on dealing with China. We've asked him to take a principled stand for human rights and dignity with respect to the Olympics, but there should be no government dealing and partnering with Huawei.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yes, you may.
The House of Commons Finance Committee is tabling its pre-budget report, I gather. But I wanted to ask you, Mr. O'Toole, what are your party's top priorities for the budget? I noticed you've written a letter, and it was just circulated recently. Maybe those are the same priorities, but could you just lay out your top concrete priorities for the budget?
We need to get Canada working post-COVID, and we're disappointed with the situation with the vaccines. And I'm worried the government that has been late on rapid tests, late on vaccines, will be late on that economic rebuilding when we round the corner in COVID. And our approach, Steve, will be to focus on jobs for Canadians in all sectors and in all regions of the country. We can't afford right now to have Mr. Trudeau's specific desire to save jobs in one area and to allow jobs in manufacturing or in energy to be transitioned, in his words. We need families to be strong by mom or dad working, communities to be strong. That's how we're going to recover. It should not be an Ottawa knows best. It should be an all hands on deck economic recovery.
We'll now take questions in the room. Mackenzie?
Gray with CTV. Your position this morning about having the government look to move the Olympics. If the government and the IOC, if the government's unsuccessful and the IOC does not move the Olympics out of China, is it your position that Canadian athletes should not go if it stays in Beijing?
Well, there's a couple steps there, Mackenzie. First is we need to relocate the games. We have the time to do that, and we think the IOC and partner countries should look at countries that have the capacity to do that. We do not want the athletes to be prevented from performing and inspiring. It's only if that is not possible and there's no change in conduct by the state of China that we should examine whether our athletes compete. I've made my position clear. While there's a genocide taking place, we should not be turning a blind eye to that and acting as if nothing's happening. So that's why we need to relocate.
Today, the Prime Minister is going to make an announcement on guns. Would you support any buyback plan that the Prime Minister could bring in place to have Canadians who might own guns that were legal at the time that now become restricted, for them to get some kind of money back for the guns that they would now not be able to have?
We will always focus on ways to keep Canadians safe and have a common sense approach with respect to firearms regulations. Unfortunately, just a few weeks ago, Mr. Trudeau's Liberals voted against a measure to try and stop the illegal smuggling of firearms from the United States, which is the problem here. And I think Mr. Trudeau misleads people when he tries to suggest that buying things back from hunters and other Canadians who are law-abiding is somehow going to solve the problem of shooting and criminal gang activity in the big cities. It's ignoring the real problem, and it's dividing Canadians. So we will continue to put forward common sense solutions like we did just 2 weeks ago.
Man?
Good morning, Mr. O'Toole. This is Man Al-Hamidi with the Canadian Press. Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland written you a letter asking why the Conservatives are, as she quote unquote, using delay tactics regarding Bill C-14. What's your response to this? And do you oppose the bill, or do you oppose parts of it? I need to just give us your view on the bill.
We have always supported programs to help Canadians in this pandemic. In fact, we've worked quickly to not just support programs, but then to improve them, like the wage subsidy and rent support. Minister Freeland knows that this legislation is intended to fix problems from their last rush exercise. We're having some modest debate. She and her government are in charge of the legislative calendar. If it's a priority, we should be debating that bill today and every day until it gets passed.
On another topic, the NDP has proposed sending military to help establish vaccine centers in different provinces. Is this something you would support?
We have to work as partners with the provinces and with First Nation communities to make sure that specific needs, particularly remote communities, can be met. We need vaccines now. People are frustrated. We can understand that, but we have to partner. I proposed using the military 10 months ago because as a veteran, I know their capacity to perform, particularly in challenging circumstances. But we have to work with provinces, with First Nation communities. We need the vaccines so we can get them in the arms of Canadians and focus on our economic well-being.
David?
Morning, Mr. O'Toole. David Thornton, CBC News.
Hi, David.
Where would you like to see the Olympics go then? If not China, would you support Canada or the U.S. hosting a joint games?
I'm calling on the Prime Minister to reach out to the IOC and ask this process to be quickly examined, and we should work with other countries and the IOC to come up with options. Obviously, there's a lot of countries that have either recently hosted Winter Games or are in the preparation stage. I think there's lots of options that could be considered. We can no longer ignore the genocide that's taking place, and I think other countries will come to the conclusion Canada needs to show some leadership.
But wouldn't it be easier if, you're complaining to offer a solution, hey, we'll host the games. But I want to ask you something else about the budget and your priorities. I noticed that there's no mention of a fiscal anchor and getting back to balance. Are you abandoning those calls that your party has previously made?
I've said many times, David, that we need to take the next decade to get our fiscal house in order, focused on getting people working as quickly as possible so that we can reduce plans and assistance packages in a way that's fair and provide some support for small businesses and acutely impacted sectors like tourism. We need to focus on that job and economic opportunity for all Canadians as we take a longer-term approach to get the finances in order. It's been 2 years since there's been a budget from this government. They seem to have no concern about job losses and the debt that's being piled up. I think Canadians are worried about the future post-COVID under this Liberal government.
And I'm told this is all the time we have, and this concludes the press conference. Thank you.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup.